Welcome to webinar 5, our broadcast from Te Rau Ora Tari here in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. No mai haere mai. Today we will discussing e pēhea tātou I whakarungatia ai te rāhui. The English translation is Navigating the Lockdown. An article written by Kerry Butler for the Te Rau Ora publication Ko Tōku Ara Rā Aotearoa. Our Journey, New Zealand COVID-19 2020, which contains 9 articles in total. Kerry Butler shares her experiences and stories as the pouwhakahaere of Te Kite Pounamu, Te Rau Ora, during the Level 4 lockdown. Te Kite Pounamu is the national voice for Māori with lived experience of mental health and addictions, tasked to improve Māori health outcomes. Kerry writes, I knew from my past experiences that level of confinement would have a significant impact on my mental health. As it was, I woke up on day 1 of the rāhui, the ritual prohibition, with a sense of relief. I was able to remind myself that I could still take my dog for our daily walks. I just had to be 1 metre away from everyone. Most importantly, no one was locking a door behind me and restricting me from all forms of contact with friends, loved ones, and the rest of the outside world, as I was still able to contact across text, phone, and social media. The simple things like being able to make a hot drink when I wanted, have a bath when I wanted, and eat whenever and whatever was available in the house was still something I could do. End of quotation. Kerry advises, as Māori with lived experience, the way we utilise our experiences and expertise when faced with adversity or challenges can be explained using our tūmata kōkiritia, shifting the paradigm, Māori lived experience-led change management framework. Tūmata means to ignite, to incinerate, to burn, as getting rid of the old thinking. Kōkiritia means to champion, to promote, to lead, and to advocate. Tūmata kōkiritia therefore means igniting champions to lead, to advocate, and provoke. Shifting the paradigm. The 4 core values that underpin the tūmata kōkiritia framework are mā tauranga Māori, Māori education, tino rangatiratanga, sovereignty, manaaki, care, kotahitanga, unity. Today, to discuss Kerry's article further, we have Aaron Niuapu. A little bit later on, I will introduce Te Pau Henry, who will be our second speaker. He whaitatiri ki te rangi, ko te arawa ki te whenua. Aaron is from Te Arawa Waka, and the whakatauki means the noise of Te Arawa on earth is like unto the thunder of heaven. Ki te taha tōna māma ko Ngāti Whakaue te iwi, ko Marsh te whānau. On Aaron's mother's side, Ngāti Whakaue is the iwi, and Marsh is the whānau name. Ki te taha tōna pāpā ko Ngāti Hāmoa te iwi, ko Niuapu te whānau. On Aaron's father's side, Samoa is the iwi, and Niuapu is the whānau name. Aaron has been a national representative of Te Kite Pounamu since November 2019. Recently, Aaron moved from the Auckland District Health Board to be Kai Whakamana, the lead for Te Kite Pounamu Training and Development. He is part of the operations team for Te Kite Pounamu. Aaron will discuss further the issues raised in Kerry Butler's article. Kia ora, Aaron.
Kia ora whanaunga. Nā mihi mai oha ki a koutou katoa. I won't go into any further introductions for myself because Neil has very eloquently outlined that around my whakapapa and whatnot, so I will get straight into it and screen share. Here we go. Awesome. So tōtahi, I just want to do a big mihi to Kerry around this awesome kaupapa and the chapter that she has written, and me speaking to this chapter in her stead. It's only right that I chuck out a mihi to her. So Kerry, e hoa, this is for you. Yeah, so as Neil outlined, Te Kite Pounamu, we are the national organisation of Māori with lived experience. Obviously, in regards to our whakapapa, just going through some of the points there, we were established around a series of consultation hui with the wider whānau with lived experience around 2015, 2016. And the two pivotal points that drive us, that have driven us over the last 4 years have been to advocate for strategies in the elimination of restrictive practice. And that's a key point, especially in regards to Kerry's chapter, and to inspire change in the mental health and addiction sector as a whole. Just a little whakapapa also around how our organisation is placed. We have our national ropu, our overall governance group. We have our regional leads across 8 regions. And within those regions, there are steering groups too. And then the operations team, in which I'm a part of, and a big mihi out to our national ropu, our regional leads, everyone across the motu, and our awesome hardworking operations team. If you do want to contact us for any reason, please do flick us an email to kitepounamu@teroora.com. I won't go too much into objectives because I do want to leave enough time for the actual kōrero. But again, we provide that national and regional voice for our Māori whānau with lived experience. Everyone within our wider organisation have lived experience, and Te Kite Pounamu is part of the larger Te Ora whānau. We want to ensure that our Māori with lived experience in the peer community inform and influence systemic change that responds to the needs of Māori, especially in light of obviously the recent mental health inquiry. A big kaupapa is to challenge the institutional racism within the wider health sector, but more focused on the mental health and addiction sector. And also a big strengthening of the Māori lived experience workforce. So we're within this kōrero, you'll hear different facets of Kerry's chapter, as well as the wider scope of what was going on during the rāhui in our work, to advocate for Māori to receive high quality care and support from services, and obviously in relation to the rāhui in Kerry's chapter. So I just again want to give a mihi out to Kerry. The national ropu, the regional leads, the wider whānau throughout the motu, and our operations team. Cool whānau. So to get a gist of who we are as Te Kite Pounamu, our founding objectives and push, especially around restrictive practice, having that in the back of your mind, and then coming into this chapter that Kerry's talking about, moving from a sense of restriction to resilience, especially underneath the rāhui. And over the rāhui, there were so many concerns that whānau throughout all of the regions shared with us around how the whole experience of being restricted, the experience of uncertainty and not knowing if they were going to have access to their services and support networks, their whānau, whether they were in community teams or in the units. all this uncertainty was obviously bringing up a whole lot of fear, anxiety, and re-triggering some experiences. So to get a sense of that, it wasn't just a national lockdown for us with lived experience. It was bringing up the experiences that we have had formerly going through services, and especially ones in which we've received restrictive practices. And I know probably Te Pou in his kōrero will talk about those service barriers and stuff that had come up during the Rahui. So as any awesome Māori organization does, whenever a challenge comes upon us, we just mahi a te mahi, move forward and really push forward, even if we don't have any funding or backing or wider support like some of the mainstream services. And so what we initiated is that we had weekly meetings with our national ropu and our regional leads to really make those executive decisions as to how we can still be that voice for our wider lived experience and peer community throughout the motu, as well as keep our liaison with the ministry and all the national and regional bodies to ensure that services and funding streams weren't being impacted to have a flow and a consequential impact upon our whānau. So from that space, and from those weekly and regular meetings between our national ropu and our regional leads, we really utilized our tūmata kōkiritia framework that Neil mentioned earlier in this kōrero, and feel free e whanaunga to jump in whenever to kōrero to this as well. So tūmata kōkiritia is an awesome change management framework. And it really underpins the whole notion of us as iwi Māori and us as Māori whānau with lived experience of mental health and addictions to really lead and determine our own solutions, and that we find not only purpose but potential and well-being when we do implement our own solutions. And so, as Neil had highlighted, that the founding values and principles within this framework being mātauranga around education, tino rangatiratanga around our sovereignty and determination, manaki around our care, and kotahitanga around unity. So I'll just haere tonu through those points and talk in a wider scope as to what mahi we did accomplish over the Rahui. So first, when it comes to mātauranga Māori, a huge thing about being Māori is being Māori, if that makes sense, and unapologetically Māori. And, you know, the mainstream services were doing their mahi, but we knew that from our communities, we wanted self-determined solutions, and solutions that have always been part of our vocabulary, part of our history, part of the way we do well-being, you know, all the way back in the rā from our tipuna. And so when we came up with all these executive decisions from the national and the regional space to implement actually regular catch-ups with whānau throughout the motu using our digital tools through Zoom, we utilized that space to create a well-being forum, utilizing our mātauranga Māori, and obviously implementing our own solutions. So what eventuated was a regular online wānanga through the use of Zoom. That was utilizing Pūrākau Paki Waitara kōrero Paki, and through those indigenous narratives, through those indigenous tools, you know, whānau were able to externalize some of that mamae, some of that fear, some of that unknowingness that was kind of churning inside because of the correlation between the Rahui and previous experiences of restriction in services. They were able to externalize all those emotions and worries into these pūrako into these pakiwaitara, these kōrero paki, and then re-internalize the lessons that we learned, not as individuals, but as a collective within these online wānanga. And at the moment, that has obviously, since the Rahui has finished, our online wānanga have taken on a different form. And they're funnily enough known as kotahitanga now. So every Thursday, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., we have a online well-being wānanga in which people within our lived experience and peer community can come in, check in, share their own experience, their own skills, their own mātauranga, as well as having guest speakers in to facilitate that space around our wellness. So that's where we took the initiative to utilize our mātauranga over the Rahui, found that it was an awesome place to touch base with our whānau, especially around alleviating some of that anxiety. And that has continued in a weekly online wānanga ko tahitanga. Neil, please do jump in if I'm speaking too fast there. Ho. You know us, Te Arawa whāros, we love to talk.
Whai ana. Kōrero mai, kōrero mai.
Kōrero mai. Cool. And now moving on to the other facet of the tūmata kōkiritia. One of the other values and principles is tino rangatiratanga. And I cannot highlight how important it is around our determination, not only as iwi Māori, but as iwi Māori with lived experience, our determination and control over our own solutions and the delivery of those solutions. And we got heaps of feedback over the Rahui, and we changed up our feedback to also be more accessible with our surveys as well. But all of the avenues of feedback we were receiving is that our whānau felt like there was a lack of consultation from the ministry, from regional and national bodies, especially in the development of those wellbeing apps and programs that were getting funded left, right, and center. And there was a sense that that they were meant to be produced to make things more accessible for whānau, but they were actually very inaccessible. One, in the language that was used, they were either too wordy or technical, as well as in just regards to the logistics. And speaking from another space as well, I know that in the same period of time, the Auckland District Health Board's lived experience team did some feedback surveys and found some correlative data as well that a lot of our iwi whānau, a lot of our iwi Māori whānau did not have the stable internet or access to computers and whatnot as other whānau whaiora did. So, there was all these apps and stuff coming out. Whānau did have the means to access them. They weren't culturally safe, culturally responsive, and on the other hand, there were many whānau that couldn't access them because of a lack of stable and sustainable internet or access to laptops and whatnot. So again, we didn't receive any funding around that. We just haere tonu and did the mahi. And I know as a wider organization, we also showed awhi and tautoko to whānau through the use of seeing how we could come up with data packages and access to phones so that they could engage with us through those online forums. So that was again another big taker from that Rahui experience, which came to correlate with the third value of tūmata, which is manaaki and care. So obviously there was some whānau that even we were trying our best to accommodate with the data and the technology, that the Zoom wānanga were still inaccessible. Hence, out of that, was birthed our 0800 number. And through that space, whānau were able to ring up our 0800 line and just kōrero about their anxieties, their fears, some of those triggers around the correlation between past history of restrictions and restrictive practice and services, as well as the rahui, just to have that safe space and that cultural space to talk to someone with lived experience on the line. And obviously 0800, it's a free phone line, so more accessible. So all of these things were kind of coming up as inequities for our people. And again, just as most Māori organizations, we just get on with the mahi and try and make things as accessible as we can for our whānau. Lastly, and I'm aware of the time, that the last value surrounding tūmata kōkiritia is kotahitanga, that sense of unity. And as lived experience, obviously we find that unity, that comfortableness, that safety, knowing that we all have lived experience going through services, going through community services, going through the units. But we also find unity in our positive stories. And a big theme that came up within the online wānanga, the 0800 line, and all of the other forums that we were trying to be accessible for our whānau, is that they were making huge strides within their own lives and exercising their own rangatiratanga within their own support networks. And through that, through the sharing of all these positive stories of resilience, that there was almost like a groundswell realization that, you know, we're not so much a community that has been ostracized, even though we have been. We're not just a community that has been traumatized by the mental health system, although we have, but we're a community of resilience. We're people of resilience, and we're leaders of resilience. And I think that really gets to the gist of Kiri's chapter, as well as the wider mahi that Te Kite Pounamu and other Māori organizations were doing during the rahui, that we were just getting on with the mahi, and we were leading with our resilience. So in summary, in all of that, it's really important, not only within the wider sector, but dare I say within our Te Ao Māori world, that when it comes to mental health and addictions, that our communities with lived experience need to be at the forefront of designing, delivering, and evaluating services, projects, te mea, that are meant to help our people, but more so to empower our own voice. And the mental health inquiry for the government said that they were going to put us a lived experience at the center. And I guess my wero is back to the wider sector, but also our wider Māori whānau, that when it comes to mental health, the wero is to put us at the center of the driver's seat, because we are leaders of resilience, and amongst all of the triggering concerns that came from the rahui, we showed our strength. We showed our strength in our kotahitanga, our manaki, our tino rangatiratanga, and harkening back to our mātauranga Māori. So amongst it all, hopefully I didn't ramble on too much, and hopefully I stuck to the time. But kia koe e whanaunga e Neil, I'll pass the rāku back to you and for your facilitation with Te Pau.
Kia ora, kia ora. Ngā mihi nui kia koe mo tō korero tino a tāhua rawa atu e Aaron, ai, ka rawe. I just wanted to go back to the points you were making about tino rangatiratanga and the fact that you were able to gain heaps of feedback. And I think that speaks to a communication network that Te Kitea Pounamu has put in place, because I remember it at the time, was that first off, Te Kitea Pounamu started sending out newsletters or e-pānui, and then the second thing they started was letting people know about that they wanted to organise those 8 different regional committees. And then the next minute there were photos coming out of who the committee members were in each of those regional committees. And so I know that it wasn't likely when you said you had heaps of feedback, because Te Kitea Pounamu had in fact set up the network that was able to bring that feedback in. And it was an extremely good, useful feedback that helped to provide great direction and leadership in a time where the boundaries and the edges became a little bit foggy. So, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, and kia kaha koutou me ngā mahi e hara I te mahi mama. It's not easy work, it's super difficult work. And I know that it must have taken many, many hours of time, outside the 8 hours per day that we normally need to work in order to set up those kind of networks and to support those people that were operating within those networks. Kia ora koutou. I'd like to now introduce Te Pou Henry. Ngā pū manawa e waru o Te Arawa. So Te Pou is from Te Arawa also, and ngā pū manawa e waru o Te Arawa reminds Te Arawa, all of us, of how we are all interconnected, even though we may be, as Te Pou is, Ngāti Kia and Ngāti Tuara, he is also still connected to every other tribe around both our lakes, or all of our lakes. There's more than 2. So tēnā koe Te Pou. Te Pou is a Pautaki Reo Toruhu, alcohol and other drugs consumer leader, and an alcohol and other drugs registered clinician for Kāhui Tu Kaha, a not-for-profit provider of housing and mental health services for the Ngāti Whātua organisation. Te Pou has recently joined the Tamaki Makaurau Regional Committee for Te Kitea Pounamu. Kia ora Te Pou, great to have you with us today. Tēnā koe.
Yeah, kia ora. So no reira mihi atu kia kōrua, ngā whanaunga. Ai tika tērā ko tōku hapu, ko Ngāti Kia, Ngāti Tuara, ko tōku whānau ingoa I tērā tā, ko te whānau Wairia. So kia ora everyone. So yep, name's Te Pou Henry, born and bred in Te Arawa, Rotorua. From Ngāti Kia, Ngāti Tuara. My whānau are the Wairia whānau from out that way, out Horohoro. Also, my tupuna is the whanaunga to Tamate Kapua, who is Ngāti Roirangi. And my whare tupuna is named after his wife, which is Kia Roa. And so, yeah, very privileged to be able to be asked to try and tautoko this kaupapa. So I've been working in mental health and addictions now for going on 9 years now. I also have my own lived experience around alcohol and substance abuse, mental health. And this is a very an important kaupapa that's really close to my heart. And I love the fact of what Te Rauora is doing, particularly thinking in context to My Māori, More Māori solutions, which is a very important subject. And what stood out for me, and just after hearing the whanaunga's kōrero around one of the principles in Whaia Kiri's rangahau, which is mātauranga, is a very important kaupapa. So I'm going to tie this kōrero into where I was recently working, which was at Te Atea Marino. So a mihi to my whānau there, all the kaimahi, our kaumātua kuia, and everyone else holding down the good mahi, Te Atea Marino Moko Services, which comes under Whitiki Mauria, Waitemata DHB. And so it was a very interesting time, I guess, and I'm speaking from personal experience as a alcohol and drug clinician, going into kind of alert mode during the COVID and figuring out how we're going to help our whānau. And so we were quite, you know, as everyone knows, when we got the call that COVID had hit, Auckland was the dominant risk in the first wave. For me, being a Māori, and going back to that principle around mātauranga, you know, I go straight into the whakaaro around rangi and papa, you know, and when they were still in the embrace, in a state of tapu, you know, and the tension that was happening within the different elements within our pūrākau story. And for me at the time, having that awareness as an alcohol and drug clinician, also having a clinical awareness, quickly what I noticed though was the limited awareness for other practitioners right across the Waitemata DHB in context to Te Ao Māori, and not be having limited or no understanding around, you know, what does tapu mean? You know, and so when our whānau were in COVID, few weeks prior to lockdown, because I had worked in home care medical services, which is the alcohol and drug helplines, gambling lines, need to talk, depression line. I had a good awareness of the national sort of networks and services. I had a good base awareness, rather than just Te Atea Marino, because remember, in Te Ao Māori, we don't think of a tangata as just a tangata. You know, we think in context to the pāhara keke and the importance of our tamariki being at the centre of everything that we do, you know, and thinking in context as a Māori and one very small part of a whole iwi, you know, and then also whakapapa to other iwis. For myself, I was mamai. Why? Because I was aware that whanaungatanga is very important to us Māori. And I was struggling at the time, being, even though I'm good at my recovery these days, if I was struggling, I couldn't help but think about how our whānau that are at the highest end of the continuum for every deficit health outcome, I couldn't help but think about, you know, how me as a kaimahi in Te Atea Marino was going to support the tangata that we were contracted to think about, but more importantly, knowing that their tangata is connected to a wider whānau, now that access to their support is limited. So what we did, one of the strategies is what we did is we're lucky, myself being able to work with our managers And as our team, we're a very resilient team and come up with ideas around Zoom capability. And having that awareness of how to do phone counselling and still maintain some type of whanaungatanga connection in that way. And so we were able to strategize and put in a plan on how we were going to maintain that connection with our tangata whaiora. And the good thing around that is this is a prime example, and this is just my whakaaro on an individual note, just, you know, out of respect for Waitemata. As our team, I believe we actually led the way in terms of innovation. Before it hit and we went into lockdown, we already started to strategize on around putting our Zoom capability in place, contacting our whaiora, letting them know prior what's happening to keep them up to date with what's most likely to happen in terms of lockdown and restricted access to services. So we were able to inform them prior, also have a strategy in place, which was good. We were kind of ahead of the game. And then the other thing, one of the challenges, however, whānau, was we were so used to when whānau come to us doing whanaungatanga. And then for our new whānau, we do a whakatau, we have a kai, we break bread and we whakanoa the relationship. You know, for us it was whanaungatanga first, and then we go into the clinical stuff, you know, to whakanoa the mauri of our tangata whaiora. And so we were quite anxious, myself personally, around how we were going to maintain that process, because we know, even clinicians know, doctors know, right across the health profession, is that the most important thing is around getting that clinicians will call it a therapeutic rapport or therapeutic alliance. And we knew that our tikanga and being able to do a whakatau with our whānau and whakanoa our relationships through our practices, we know the how valuable that is, which is we're able to build rapport faster and long term get better results with whānau, because trust is established quite quickly through our process of whanaungatanga. And so online, we had to strategize around doing research around what other people were doing. An example was, how are we going to do a hongi? You know, when I meet another whānau member and it's online. And so one of the things we come up with was actually something from one of the whanaungas, one of my cousins from Te Arawa, James Pickup, which was a hāngongoi. So we could still whakanoa during an assessment, do whanaungatanga first and do our whakatau, which is not quite a pōhiri, but has the similar intent to remove tapu and establish and maintain that way of getting rapport with Māori that we know kind of gives us the edge. So that was one of the, I guess, main things for us. And what we did here too, I had a whanaunga that was working in domestic violence services from Te Arawa too, Ngāti Pikia. And the calls for violence in South Auckland went through the roof, you know. And why I'm happy to be a part of this kaupapa is, what was really concerning for me is, okay, you know, if it happens again, if there's a big wave, you know, what's our crisis plan for Māori? And also knowing that there's very limited clinicians that have an understanding of what mātauranga is, you know, and that our principles are applied. They're not just put on a wall. They're not just things you go and learn 5 minutes or an hour at a wānanga, and then you put that certificate in a folder, you leave it there. You know, how are we going to, I guess, support non-Māori practitioners better? So when it comes to them having to work with our tangata whaiora that are struggling with mental health and addictions, we need to be able to, I think, how can we strategize and equip them better with being able to apply those principles that are spoken about in Whaia's research around tino rangatira, tiratanga and so forth. And that's kind of my passion and drive to hopefully try and support te kite pounamu and our Māori whānau with lived experience. And again, how I know is again having that lived experience as a person that struggles regularly with PTSD, depression, and I know I can't use substances because I'm more than likely to become addicted because of all the predisposed factors that come along with being a Māori, you know, that lived experience lens and the voice of not just consumers, Māori consumers, you know. How do we honour the Māori consumer voice right across the sector? Because in another way, I guess that's real partnership and participation and protection for our whānau. So, yeah, I'll leave it there if that's okay, or if there's any pātai.
Kia ora. Oh, I just wanted to make a comment because you spoke about Zoom. I was there when Te Kite Pounamu first started putting Zooms together, and that was just before we went into level 4 lockdown. And then they started this kind of machine of organisation where they put a pamphlet together, they got an 0800 number going, they got some pūtia to pay for people that didn't have enough data.
Awesome.
And so all of that, so which goes back to my earlier kōrero about tino rangatiratanga, is that we got the good feedback because we had actually set up not only conversations over phones, but Zoom conversations where bigger groups of people could come together and they could listen and they could comment on what other people were saying.
Awesome.
So that was something, and I know that Kerry talks about that in her article. Aaron, you'd probably know which one. Does it come under tino rangatiratanga manaki?
Oh, do you want me to talk, Keho?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So when it comes to all of that, for want of a better word, machinery of support, with the 0800 line and the online wānanga. So with the 0800 line and the one-to-one support, that was around the manaki and that really intimate care. And then when it comes to the wider scope of our online forums through the Zoom wānanga, that's where we implemented the mātauranga. So I guess in comparison and linking in with how Te Pou's experience from a service delivery perspective and utilizing Zoom, utilizing those online forums to still engage with our whānau. I wouldn't say necessary to Māorify, but to Māorify those online forums, but just to indigenize that virtual space. And you know, the whanaunga was talking about those processes and doing as best as we can. And we did receive feedback as well that even though people were enjoying the online Zoom wānanga, that they were still missing, they were still feeling for that kanohi ki te kanohi. And there were a lot of our face-to-face wānanga that were cancelled, that people were looking forward to. But it was the reality of the situation with the Rahui. And, you know, Te Pou, you mentioned, you know, that our people are innovative people and just get on with the mahi. And we did, as a wider community, and you know, utilizing Zoom for your engagement, and we utilize Zoom for our online wānanga, as well as utilizing the 800 line. And I think that's the specialness and the beauty of our people, is that we're not only resilient, but we're innovative in times of extreme stress.
Kia ora. One of the things I've noticed about Keri's article were the whakatauki that she's put in. And I'm just mindful of what Te Pou said to us, that our principles are applied. And so for mātauranga Māori, Keri wrote, mā te whakatū ka mōhio, mā te mōhio ka marama, mā te marama ka mātou, mā te mātou ka ora. With discussion comes knowledge. With knowledge comes light and understanding. With light and understanding comes wisdom. And with wisdom comes wellness. And I've heard, you know, this idea of stories that were shared to support resilience. And I wondered whether either of you might be able to share a story about resilience that you found helpful.
Story about resilience that I found helpful. Is that from feedback from whānau?
No, this is, well, yeah, this is from Keri.
Pūrākau?
Yeah, Pūrākau. And so Keri in her article talks about how the origins of mātauranga Māori came from Rangiatia. And so therefore Rangiatia is known as the first whare wānanga.
Yeah.
And so it's that idea of knowledge. And I heard you speak about it, Te Pou, when you were talking about the embrace of Ranginui and Papatuanuku. And then you spoke about the tensions within the different elements, which, you know, like I interpreted it as the different, like the different gods, such as Tangaroa, Tawhiri Mātia, Tāne Mahuta, who actually were arguing with each other.
Kia ora mō tērā. And again, it's when we look at our atua in that pūrākau and whiro being an elder and wanting to dominate, but knowing that very well in our tikanga around tuakana taina, you know, having a tuakana taina helps to balance each other out, you know, and that forced Tāne to think strategically on how he was going to put a story across to whiro. And the story I've been told is that which is around the hinatore, the glowworm, and one of the other tamariki went, and this comes from Matua Mark, so just to acknowledge that, and my whanaunga Kahurangi, who's very involved in, he's from Te Arawa too, very involved in mahi atua wānanga, who I had the privilege to learn from and work with. And so the hinatore, the glowworm, whiro did not want the separation because he likes darkness. A bit like our whānau struggling with restrictions and then kind of feeling like, what about the Māori voice? What about us? We also had kaumātua kuia was in politics. what about our voice? And so the good thing though with Tāne, just like Te Rauora, just like Te Atea Marino and what we did, Tāne was a strategist, and clinicians or mindfulness practitioners will know. So Tāne is a tree, he's the god of the forest. So mindfulness, being fully present, fully aware to all the vibrations from all the atua in the space. And so that pūrākau sources us as Māori from that mātauranga to be able to elicit our own potential within us and be like Tāne and be able to switch on that potential to strategize. And just like Tāne did through the separation, we came up with strategies to be able to get our whānau to a state of noa without restriction as best as we could. So had we not had a Māori informed approach, you know, then our whānau would more than likely not have been able to get the benefits as they did from us being able to use our mātauranga and their potential within us to develop the urgent processes and procedures that we had to quickly develop at that time. And so that potential, though, I think, again, around non-Māori practitioners needing to listen to us as Māori and understand that mātauranga is an applied approach. And if you can get the right support through wānanga like Te Rauora, you can learn how to develop mā te rongo ka mōhio, mā te mōhio ka mārama, mā te mārama ka ora. So start engaging with organisations like Te Rauora so that you can be ahead of the game, even if you get enough mātauranga to elicit, use those pūrākau or Māori principles to engage with Māori and then triage them to the right Māori services. And I guess that's how we work. Our people, they're beautiful. Whether you're Māori or not a Māori, we are masters at hospitality and strategy, just like Tāne. So yeah.
So on the back of that, now for tino rangatiratanga, Keri has used the whakatauki, he kākono ahau I ruia mai I rangiatia, e kore au e ngaro. I am a seed sown in rangiatia. I will never be lost.
Yeah,
Aye.
and I know that that's one
Yeah,
of her
always,
favorite. That's one of her favorite ones. And just like with our pūrākau, our whakatauki and our whakatoaki, that they ground us in the reality that no matter the stresses and the triggers that come with our own lived experiences or things that are impacting upon our recovery journey, like the rahui, that our po, that can keep us strong and to weather those storms, as again going back to our mātauranga. And yeah, I just know that that's one of her favorite ones. And the thing is that there's almost like a beautiful dance when you're telling a pūrākau. And I remember one of the I'm aware of the time, by the way. I remember facilitating one of the pūrākau of the rahui with no intention whatsoever to kind of prescribe something or prescribe an end goal from facilitating that pūrākau. And then it was just a beautiful dance to then hear and see everyone on the Zoom wānanga kind of chime in and say, hey, I relate to this, or you know, from that experience, I've gained this knowledge of what I can do to rectify this problem that's triggering me because of the rahui. And that was just coming out dynamically and naturally and from that collective knowledge, which came from the collective awareness through the use of our mātauranga. It was just a beautiful thing, and I think that the most important kaupapa and practice that we can ever do as Māori leaders, whether in Te Rauora, Te Kite Pounamu, or throughout the wider health sector, is to give our whānau the space, and through the use of our mātauranga, that they have their own solutions. We have our own solutions, and it's a beautiful thing watching just that click, but not like up here in the hinenaro, but that wairua click when you're just facilitating a pūrākau, and then people are just like, oh shucks, I was feeling this way about the rahui, but now relating it to that atua or that paki waitara, or one of those cheeky fellas from Te Aroa and that paki waitara, that I'm not in this alone, and these experiences my tipuna experienced, and all of that cathartic knowledge that just comes out and just wells out of whānau, and everyone else is listening to it while people are almost like processing that out loud. That's a beautiful thing, and it really speaks to the awesomeness of wānanga. And so yeah, I'm aware of the time, but that was just me rambling on a bit.
Awesome. Tino pai. Te Pau, did you have a comment at all about that particular whakatauki?
Which one was it again? Sorry.
He kākono ahau I ruia mai I rangi atia. He kore au e ngaro.
Yeah, and part of me and my recovery is I thought these things were lost, but really sometimes all it needs is someone to flick the light on, and then to get that mauri to start vibrating, that through the re-indigenizing myself, my ngākau, my hinengaro, my tinana, my wairua, my āhua katoa, and we know that as practitioners, if we can learn to utilise that in our practice and help whānau to elicit and switch that light back on, the healing that comes from that is I believe is what's missing from our health sector, particularly in mental health and addiction. And again, it's our Māori voice needs to be heard, but also we need to strategize more again, and also non-Māori to come to the table and us to awhi them to experience and really get the gist of our mātauranga, because then they're going to be more well equipped to triage them to the right service, but also flick that light on, that kākano that's never lost. It's never going to be lost. It's always going to be there. But to switch that kākano on to get some in-depth Indigenous healing. Yeah, Indigenous Māori healing. So yeah.
And I would just add to that and remind non-Māori, mai Māori, more Māori. Hey, mai Māori, for Māori.
Kia ora.
I ngā rangatira o Te Arawa, tēnā kurua mo a kōrero, tautoko I a tātou kaupapa o Te Kite Pounamu. Ngā mihi nui, ngā mihi mahana ki a kūrua mō tō kōrero teitei rawa atu, hohonu rawa atu, whānui rawa atu, reka rawa atu. Tēnā kūrua, tēnā kūrua, tēnā kūrua. Thank you so much for this awesome kōrero that you've given us today. We haven't had, we've got one comment. Kia ora, awesome webinar. Oh, well, yeah, that's the kind of comments we want. And yeah, I have learnt a lot today, and I've learnt it through the two of you. So I can only imagine that the people that are going to watch this webinar are going to appreciate the gift you have given us today. Tēnā kōrua.
Thank you, Matua.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.